In Canada, we are still pushing back the wilderness of our vast northern country to create new farmlands and to develop new resources. One of our modern frontiers is the district around the Peace River in the province of Alberta. The Peace River has its source in the Canadian Rockies, where moisture carried by winds from the Pacific Ocean turns into snow. Because our mountain region is so beautiful, we have set aside great areas of land for national parks. Here, all wildlife is protected, and not even trees may be cut. The slow-melting glaciers and the snowfields of the mountains feed the rivers of Western Canada. From the Rockies, the rivers flow in two directions. Many of them flow west through British Columbia to the Pacific Ocean. Others flow east. The Peace River is one of these. It gives its name to the frontier district in the province of Alberta, where we are developing our newest farmlands. Until 50 years ago, tribes of Indians hunted and fished in the wilderness around the Peace River. But in 1916, when a railroad connecting with other parts of Canada was completed, the first settlers moved into the region. Because the soil of the Peace River country is so fertile, it is becoming one of the important grain-producing areas of Canada. In this northernmost farm country, the summers are short, but the long hours of daylight make it possible for big crops of grain to ripen. Barley and rye grow well. Oats can be harvested within a few weeks of planting. Although more difficult to raise, wheat is the principal crop. Our farmers plant a variety of grains because in some seasons too little or too much rain or early or late frosts may damage the wheat. As long as the world needs more of our grain, new farmlands will be carved out of the wilderness. This wilderness is made up of a light forest growth, and its soil can be made productive. In one part of the Peace River district, our government is encouraging new settlement by clearing away large tracts of forest. The trees are uprooted with tractors and bulldozers. In flat country and on gently rolling hills, machinery can be used easily and the land can be cleared quickly. The roots and grasses in the thick topsoil are loosened by tractors and disc breakers. Although much of the rough land is being cleared and made ready by the government, the new settlers build their own homes and farm buildings. On the frontier, the men do their own carpentry and plumbing, and the women become their hard-working assistants. Often one can tell how long a farmer has been on his land by the number and size of his buildings. After providing a house for his family, he goes on to build a barn for his animals. Throughout the Peace River district, in areas away from the railroad and highways, where the only roads are overgrown paths cut through the woods by the early settlers, there are still thousands of undeveloped acres. A great many of the modern-day pioneers are war veterans, willing to share the hardships of frontier life in return for the opportunity of developing farms of their own. Roy and Ina Grimsrud are Norwegians who trained with the Canadian Army. They have decided to make homes for themselves on the undeveloped land of the Peace River country. Many young men like them are taking advantage of the generous offers which our government makes to those who will establish homesteads in our wilderness. Now and again, Roy and Ina must stop to broaden the narrow trail. Like true pioneers, the brothers bring all their possessions with them. They have at last reached the tract of land allotted to them by the government on the condition that it will be cleared and farmed. To war veterans like Roy and Ina, the government also gives more than $2,000 with which to buy seeds, farm implements, animals, and other things needed to start their farm. Today, men who make their homes in the wilderness bring food, clothing, and shelter with them. Water is drawn from a stream nearby. It will be a long time before Roy and Ina can sink their own well. During the first few months, they must use the provisions they have brought with them sparingly. The hope of someday being able to have a home of their own and land enough to grow their own food has sent generations of pioneers to new frontiers. Throughout the ages, men like the Grimsrud brothers have endured many hardships in order to gain the satisfaction of creating a homestead with their own hands. Roy and Ina know that only by clearing and cultivating their new land and by harvesting crops that can be sold will they be able to remain here permanently. Home pioneering has a sensitive vision. The same work have fewer hardships of the early days. The work is made easier by the use of a tractor borrowed from a friendly farmer in the neighborhood. During the first summer, Roy and Ina hope to clear enough land to plant and harvest one field of grain. When the first field of grain has been sown, the brothers have enough time to work on the house they are building. Although they are pioneers on a new frontier, Roy and Ina have no desire to spend a long and cold winter in the tent that has been their home. Like all farmers in the Peace River district of Western Canada, Roy and Ina are anxious about the weather. They want to be able to harvest and sell their first crop of oats as quickly as possible. Autumn rains could delay the harvest, and a heavy frost might ruin the season's work. But when more fields have been cleared, the brothers will plant several kinds of grain, so that if one crop fails, there will be others to depend upon. A symbol of our rich grain lands are the tall towers by the railroad. These are called grain elevators, and the harvests of scores of farms are stored here until the grain is shipped to the markets and mills. Some of our small towns consist of little more than these great storage bins. Grand Prairie is one of the largest grain centers in the Peace River region, but in many ways it is still a frontier community that is constantly expanding to meet the needs of new settlers. Grand Prairie has become big enough to have its own weekly newspaper. Merchants use it to advertise their goods to farmers who live in the district, and its news columns keep the settlers informed of local happenings. The bank in a frontier town is of particular service to farmers who often need money until their crops are sold. It also arranges government loans to settlers. So many farmers now have automobiles, tractors, and trucks that other men earn their living by keeping the equipment in good order. The dairy at Grand Prairie collects milk from farmers and ships what the townspeople don't use to our big cities. Grand Prairie's unpaved streets are a reminder that only a few years ago there was nothing but wilderness where this busy town now stands. radio station is extremely important to people living on a modern frontier. It brings the farmers well forecast and market reports, as well as news and entertainment from the outside world. Every day, this radio station broadcasts personal messages as a convenience to its listeners.
And to Darrell at Beaver Lodge, meet the train tomorrow night. Mother will be on it. And that sign, Josie.
In such ways, the radio helps to make life easier and more pleasant for the people who live in a modern frontier region. But there are many problems. One of the greatest is providing schoolhouses and teachers for the children who live on widely separated farms. There are many rural schoolhouses in the Peace River district with one classroom for all grades. Because few of the buildings have electric lights, the school sessions are adjusted to the hours of daylight. In the short days of the late fall and winter, classes are dismissed early in the afternoon. Few of the children who live on the outskirts of a school district can walk to and from school. Some families in each neighborhood live several miles away. The boys and girls from distant homes drive buggies or ride horseback because most of the year the dirt roads are too muddy for bicycles. When more settlers establish homes in the region, the community will be able to improve the roads and maintain a school bus. When the weather is fine, some children like to take shortcuts across the fields on their way home. Many of the oldest settlers now own prosperous farms.
Such a family are the Shirks. Because they've always worked hard, the Shirks now live comfortably.
When Shirley comes home from school, she helps her mother in many ways.
In the summer, the Shirks have a small vegetable garden close to the house.
From time to time, warm winds blow across the Peace River district and often bring rain. These strong winds sweep down from the Rockies and are called Chinooks. Shirley's father is one of the most successful farmers in the neighborhood. He has worked hard ever since the day 30 years ago when he arrived in the district by ox cart.
Mr. and Mrs. Shirk are proud of the home they built themselves and at large to meet the needs of the family. The Shirk's kitchen is one of the best cooked in the neighborhood.
What is height to sing, and the family meals are cooked on a fine wood-burning range.
The Shirks depend on their livestock to provide food and a small addition to their income.
When the hogs have grown fat, they will be sold to the livestock dealer and shipped to packing houses.
Cattle raising and dairying are profitable for the Shirks, as for many of the grain farmers.
In the busy summer months, when crops must be tended,
Care of the cows adds more hours of work for the Shirk family.
late in the afternoon, Shirley and her brother help by rounding up the cows and driving them back to the farm for milking. Shirley has learned to handle her horse with the assurance of an expert. All winter long, when the fields are covered with snow, the cows will remain in the barn. Then there is plenty of time to feed and milk them.
The busiest time of all for the Shirks and their neighbors in the Peace River District is the harvest season.
On every farm there is work enough for each member of the family. On the broad, flat grain fields of western Alberta today, farm machinery has largely replaced the teams of horses and oxen upon which the early settlers depended for planting and harvesting. Sometimes tractors, reapers, and combines are rented or borrowed, but all of the grain farmers own some mechanized equipment. Today, big combines cut the stalks of wheat, thresh out the grain, and discard the straw in a continuous operation. These big machines are so simple to operate that boys are able to run them after only a little practice. A boy at the controls of one combine can do the work of dozens of men. Partially replace himself by aiming our puzzler. If the wheat has not hardened sufficiently, it cannot be harvested with a combine. Then it must be cut and left to ripen in the fields. Frost may ruin a growing crop, but it does very little damage to grain that has been cut. When a grain that has been left in the fields is hard enough, it is threshed. Farmers help each other during the busy seasons.
If neighbors spend 2 days working at the shirks will repay them with the same amount of work.
At the end of the harvest season, the yield of more than 1 million acres of farmland is brought to the grain elevators of the Peace River district. Now the farmers learn how much their crop is worth and how much money they will have to live on for the next year. At the grain elevator, there is a separate bin for each grade of wheat. For new settlers on government property, putting their grain into the elevators is another